Aloha, namaste. This is Alexis with Radha Home Yoga, and I am here to talk about our full moon that is happening really tonight. Tonight is Friday, 9/9, September 9th, and it's happening 11:59 p.m. here in Hawaii, so it's actually officially on the 9th. It'll be 2:59 a.m. Pacific time, and later as you move farther. But nonetheless, it'll still be the most full Friday night for most people because the moon will be already waning by the time Saturday night comes around and moonrise comes. So this particular full moon is happening in a star called Purva Bhadrapada. Purva Bhadrapada bridges Aquarius and Pisces, and it is said to be the star of awakening, or the lightning flash of insight that comes that reminds us, because we are remembering, that we are beyond our bodies, that we are beyond our mundane lives, that we are beyond just having to, feed ourselves and walk ourselves and bathe ourselves, and even relations and, our families and things that hold depth within themselves. We're beyond all of it. We are our soul. And this star wakes us up to that. But it doesn't take us through all the way. It's the first of a pair. So there's Purva Bhadrapada and then there's Uttara Bhadrapada. Purva is early, Uttara is later. And the Bhadra is blessed and Pada is foot or step. And so it's the early blessed step, the one where we wake up and we're like, aha, I see it. I see, that there's more than this. And maybe that happens in some really profound way, in a ceremony or on a, sojourn to another country, or in your meditation practice, or maybe it happens when you're on your knees, breaking down, having the worst moment of your life. Or maybe it happens when you're in a store and just buying a product and just suddenly realize the bizarreness of it all. However it comes, when it comes, it is very exciting, right? It's like a lightning bolt. It's like, I see it, I get it, I'm alive, I'm awake, and I know everything, right? I've had this awakening, this enlightenment, it can even feel like. And then there's that part where, you have to go back to life and you can't, sit writhing in pain on the floor forever, or sit in your ceremony forever, or, even sit at the grocery store or wherever you are staring at your product forever. Life moves forward and you eventually have to rejoin material existence because you haven't actually made it yet. You had an awakening, but you're not fully awake. And that is a very big difference that a lot of people struggle with, because you have those moments and they're so ecstatic that you want to just keep having those moments. And so many people have had many of those moments, but they don't necessarily put the time in or the effort or the energy to deepen that path to have it be a long-lasting experience. And the reason I know that is because we're all here and we're all living in our bodies still, and we're not enlightened. And so the fact that we have had those experiences is, profound. And it is the first blessed step. It is that early step that we take that wakes us up and says, here you are. The later blessed step, the Uttara Bhadrapada, is where you dive down deep and actually have to face all the things. And I would say it's when you really walk the path. And I have said that. And in my written piece on this report, I actually think I say exactly that. But then I rewind it a little because everything is retrograde. So what better to do than rewind? And we're not going anywhere, right? The whole awakening is to realize that you're not actually going anywhere, that this time space continuum that we exist in is part of the Maya, is part of the illusion, just as much as your bag of bones and your, grocery shopping excursion. So part of the realization is recognizing that there's nowhere to go, that this is it, and that you could actually sit there writhing in pain on the floor forever, and you could pass through portals of time and portals of experience, and that it could all be in that same exact place or in that same exact time or both. And this is a deep concept, and obviously more than a full moon forecast can fully take on. But it's, I have plenty of planets in this particular star, so I feel this. I feel this strongly. This is something that I experience, work through, and an energy that I explore quite a bit. So I also have planets in Uttara Bhadrapada, so I get both ends of it. I understand the early blessed awakening, and I understand the deeper work that needs to be done. And ultimately, the final star that comes after that is Revati, when we have a more peaceful landing, when we walk each other home, right? When we guide one another, we turn back around and pass a hand or one foot. As the deity of Purva Bhadrapada is called Aja Ekapada, and he's the one-footed goat. So maybe extend your one foot to others and help bring them to where you are. And not in a way of you're up here in some high place and you're, doing some service to bring these lowlings up, but in the sense that once you really get it, you understand that if anyone's left behind, we're all left behind. You understand that if there's anyone who's, writhing in pain on the floor, then you're also writhing in pain on the floor. And that just in that same vein, if anyone's ecstatic or anyone is experiencing the highest bliss, everyone's also experiencing that. So you start to lose the I, you start to lose the part of you that thinks that you are separate from everything else. And you start to understand the collective, the whole. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to share my screen. I have a 5-year-old, so we're working on our R's. This is the chart of our full moon. And you can see the moon is here, Purva Bhadrapada, and the sun is across the way in Leo. This axis of Aquarius and Leo is the axis of society or community versus power, government, leadership, authority. Leo has to do with the government, with authority and power, and Aquarius has to do with the little people, society, and everyone, the collective. So this axis shows us where some wield power and others don't. But ultimately, the only reason those who wield power is because the little people allow it. We live in a world where power is necessary, right? Their leadership is necessary. There needs to be somebody leading, right? Or else it's just chaos. But how do these people get in positions of power? Who's holding the power and how are they holding it? We talked about this a lot 2 weeks ago in our new moon in Leo, in Magha, where there's that lineage, right? That inheritance of power, but also the download, the wisdom that gets passed from the previous generations forward. Well, in this moon, in this full moon, the sun has moved out of Magha. You can see Venus is there, and we'll talk about that in a second. The sun is in Purva Falguni. Another Purva. Purva is early, right? Falguni is the reddish lady. And this is the place of Leo, of the sign of the king, where the king is enjoying himself a lot. There's beautiful women, there's lots of food, we've got mounds of gold, we have a comfy bed and satin sheets, and what could be wrong with this life? And this is the part where we get a little caught up in our power, or others get caught up in their power, and they start to really enjoy the spoils of it. forgetting often that there are people over here that are not enjoying the satin sheets and the riches. And so those people might be at odds with the power of the king, who can come and go as he pleases and do what he wants. And today we have a lot of versions of this, right? We have actual governments, but of course our governments are almost like puppetry. We have corporations that heavily lobby the government and ultimately control it. And those corporations have become like kings and entities in and of themselves. But then we have it on a smaller level too. We have homeowners and renters. We have it's actually becoming quite a thing. I just took a trip to the mainland US over the summer and really saw how many ways that's happening. There's like, the special lane for people who pay more that can go fast, and then everyone else just lost a lane in order to give the special lane to people who will pay to drive faster on the freeway. This idea of traveling at the airport, and then there's some people, now there's more than one way to even be extra special and go faster through the airport security check. And so this kind of classism is happening more and more as we move out of the pandemic, bizarrely, rather than it having been an awakening that brought everybody into more social equity. It actually sort of widened the gap and made it more normal to have that gap, to have there be a fee of some sort, and not just necessarily a financial fee, but perhaps some, information that must be given, or some signing up that must be done, or some other things that must have to happen in order for somebody to be allowed here and other people to not be. So this concept, or this axis of Leo and Aquarius, is bringing up that power structure that we live within, and all the ways in which it's unfair and doesn't work for everybody, and in all the ways in which the people in power are really enjoying that power. Purva Falguni is ruled by Venus. So each of the nakshatras are actually ruled by a different ruler than the sign itself. The sign Leo is ruled by the sun. Purva Falguni is ruled by Venus. Venus is joined this sun. So that's increasing that element of luxury and enjoyment and pleasure. And Venus in Leo makes us feel like, well, we deserve that. I needed, some new clothes. I want to look, my best, my kingliest, my queenliest. It increases the part of us all collectively that feel, that we want to be kings, or that we want to be the ones on top. And it encourages people to continue the status quo in many ways, because they believe that if they just take XYZ step, they'll get there too. And so this is the dynamic in which we live and our society functions and operates. It's a society because it's like kind of a little bit separated from us. It's like, okay, this is society, and I can comment on society, and I can almost draw myself out of it. Like, this is society happening over there, and I'm over here living my life, whatever way you might look at that, whether you think you're living it spiritually or ethically or whatever you might fancy about yourself. That's happening in society, and you can judge society. Whereas the 11th house is also community. And the 11th house, they say, is because Aquarius is the natural 11th house. It's also community, right? And community is very different than society. And we used to live on Earth in many communities. And it wasn't this society. It was all of us are here and they're not making mistakes. We are all contributing to what's happening. If there's a mistake, we understand how that affects the whole community. And we all shift and we make a different choice. And we are inherently constantly aware of how our choices affect other people, and other people's choices affect us, and how if one person's down, it's going to, be hard for everyone in the community. There's that collectivity, and that the fact that we're all here for the consequences, and also for the choices that lead to those consequences. And so there's a more activated quality where everyone's in it. It's not happening over there. We don't just send in our ballot box or whatever, our ballot to the box once every few years to say what our opinion is. We're actively involved in it. But the fact is, we do live in a community, whether or not people want to, people want to think of it away from themselves and think that their actions are over here separate, not affecting everybody else. But that's not the case, right? Each one of us contributes to society and are part of that collective community. And the choices we make do affect other people. And the way in which we gain our power does affect other people. And the way in which we give away our power affects other people. So this is something that we can mull over, and mulling is going to happen a lot here because we have a lot of retrograde planets, and I'll talk about that in a second. But I also want to talk about this Mars drishti that's happening here on Venus and the Sun, because Mars is in Venus' sign of Taurus. Mars in Taurus can be a little bit lazy. It can be a little bit into enjoyment and food and pleasure and sex and, things that are fun. And so, particularly in Rohini, this is the star. It's funny that Purva Falguni is the reddish lady, and Rohini is the rosy red maiden. They both have to do with maiden energy. Purva Falguni is like the beginning of marriage, like prior to actually taking the vows, with that like early engagement period. And Rohini is the right maiden, waiting to be plucked. And so Mars in Rohini is particularly sensuous, and this drishti onto Venus, Mars-Venus relationship always brings tension in relations. It can bring fighting, but also can bring, high levels of eroticism, sexual fire. And then it's also on the sun, and on this luminary that's holding the whole moon cycle, right? So Mars was drishti on this sun in the new moon as well. So it's giving drishti to the power, and it's giving what? Lazy, sensuous, plotting energy. It's not the militant Mars. It's not the courageous Mars. It's not the disciplined Mars. It's a Mars that's kind of like, let's stop and have a meal and, roll around for a little bit. And then maybe we'll get back to what we're supposed to do. So that's also going to be affecting all of us. This isn't just like this is happening to people in power and they're all like this and we're all over here in Aquarius. It's like we're all experiencing all of this. So in the ways in which you're in power, and there are ways in which you're in power, I'm a parent. So obviously being a parent is one of the ways I'm in power. But everybody's in power in some way or another, and everybody lacks power in some ways, even the kings. Even the, government and the executives and the different people. Nobody actually holds ultimate power. We each have that axis within ourselves. And of course, for each of us, it's a different house in your chart. So it's going to affect a different area of your life. And if you don't know what house it is, you can look it up and see it's based on the rising sign of your Vedic chart. And I do reports on this for all 12 signs. And I'm actually just about to publish one on Mars for all 12 signs in Taurus, because he's there for 7 months. It's a little late, but again, we have a lot of retrograde planets, so things are slowed down. But I also have one for Jupiter and Saturn and the nodal axis for all 12 signs. So you can see how these transits specifically show up in your life. Are they affecting your relationships? Are they affecting your career? Are they affecting your home life? This is how you find out. So before I talk about Mercury retrograde, I'm just going to go back to this for a moment and talk about Jupiter and Saturn being retrograde first. They've been retrograde for some time now. So we've already slowed down in many areas of our life. Jupiter's our beliefs, it's our teachings, it's our ideals, and it's what inspires us. So this has been a period where we're really rethinking that, what do we believe? What is the thing that drives us? How are we connecting to that in the outside world? Well, I'll wait on an example, but ultimately there's things you believe, there's teachings you follow, there's, wisdom you share or intake, or both, hopefully. And you might be up for review on some of that. Like, what do I believe? How does this all fit together? Do my belief systems fit together? Do they all work together? Am I living in my belief systems? Am I living my ideals or not? So these are all kinds of questions that can come up for us. And we might even find ourselves going back over old teachings or going back to old teachers or back to ways that we began whatever path we're on. And you can see Jupiter's in that star of Uttara Bhadrapada, where we're really doing the work. Saturn is retrograde and Jupiter's in his own sign of Pisces. So there's a lot of wisdom in this review. There's a lot of wisdom that's not getting put out necessarily, but it's internal. The retrograde process is an internal process. It's a process where we sit with things, we mull things over. Things don't happen. We don't have a lot to show for ourselves, but we're showing up inside. And it's just as important as the output. It's just that we live in a world that really, glorifies production. But that doesn't necessarily mean that's healthy or wise to always be outputting. We need to have cycles, downtime. I mean, as women, we inherently understand that because we have moon cycles, but everybody needs downtime, rest periods to reflect and review. And am I doing this right? And am I fully, is everything that I believe really lined up quite so? So then the other planet, Saturn, that's retrograde here, has been for a while, is also in his own sign of Capricorn, and is really bringing us back to our fears, our old fears, particularly ones we started to surface around 2020 for us. So not necessarily about the pandemic specifically, but certainly, it is reflective of the type of things that came up for us when it first arose. Like, what are the things that you have fear about? Did you immediately, were you fearful about the virus itself? Were you fearful about lockdowns? Were you fearful about government control? What were the things that came up? And those same things thread through other ways in your life, right? You can see what you are afraid of in life, and also how you commit, what you spend your time on. And in large percentage, a lot of what you spend your time on might have to do with those fears or the pressures that you feel and the limit of time that you feel you have, which is ultimately the fear that you have. Ultimately, the fear we all have has to do with time and limitations. And this wake-up call of Purva Bhadrapada reminds us that there actually isn't even time, and that actually, yes, your body will age. Yes, most certainly it will die, but you never really die, right? Because you are beyond your body. Your soul is not dying. And once we sort of really, really understand that and really take that in, we start to practice life a different way. We start to live life in a different way, because the fears we have, even our greatest fears and triggers, which we all have, no matter how much work we've done spiritually, we have, because it's deeply embedded in our body, in this bag of bones that we are beyond. We have stored up so much trauma and fear and, things that come up again and again and again, almost automatically, just like you might have muscle memory for something you've done many times. If you have some skill, whether it's dance or surfing or whatever job you do, your body gets that muscle memory and just knows what it's doing. Well, we also have that memory for all of our traumas and for all of the pain and for all the things that we didn't necessarily even have a name for. And that stuff comes up whether or not we're doing all that other work, whether or not we've had our awakening, whether or not we still have those, instant reactions that come out, and we have to consciously override them. And so Saturn is taking us back on this long walk through our triggers, our traumas, our fears, and the things that we spend our time on. So both of these planets, Jupiter and Saturn, actually rule this moon, this full moon. Jupiter rules Purva Bhadrapada, and Saturn rules Aquarius, where the moon is actually located. Purva Bhadrapada bridges Aquarius and Pisces, as I said at the beginning. So it shows this, this process of moving from sort of the collective and society and what can I do to save the world, to this place where we can escape, and also where we can surrender and where we can let go of all of these attachments and all of these things we have to do and all this stuff, and start to really surrender so many layers that we ultimately find truth through in unveiling as opposed to a reaching or a striving. Jupiter rules both Pisces and Sagittarius in the Vedic system. And Sagittarius is where we're going out in the world to find the things that will, the religions, the practices, the beliefs that will save us. Pisces is where we're actually shedding it all. We're actually kind of letting it all go and starting to merge with everything in the oneness. And that's why there's this awakening star moving into that place. The early awakening happens when you're still in society. And the second part of the early awakening happens when you're in Pisces, and the deeper part is fully in Pisces, that Uttara Bhadrapada. So this is also something to look at when we think about some of the symbols of Purva Bhadrapada. It's ruled by Aja Ekapada, and it's shown by a funeral cot. So both the Bhadrapadas together make a funeral cot, which doesn't sound very, very blessed, right? It doesn't sound like a blessed step, but that's the point, is the blessed step is death. Whew, that's deep, right? The blessed step we take is to die, to release all this stuff that we think is living and truly live. It's also one of the other symbols is also a man with two faces. And this really shows this kind of visionary quality of particularly Purva Bhadrapada, where you can see the future and you can see the past. And as a result, particularly in the Aquarius part where this full moon is, we can see all the dissonance between what wants to be and what is, what's being presented and what actually is. And in today's society, where everything is kind of salesy, right? Everything's being sold to us all the time. Even like within, intimate relationships and friendships, there's a quality of people putting on their best face, or, showing you the best part of this product or the best part of this service that they're going to give you. But then it's like 2 minutes later, you kind of, dive in a little deeper, and it's like, okay, well, we told you it was free, but it's not actually free. Here's this thing, or there's that's like a marketing technique, right? And at this point, it's so prevalent that it actually is almost expected. Like we almost plan that everybody we meet and everything we see and everything we're, is always like a little bit of a scam. And it's kind of hard to trust in that environment, right? Nobody really trusts anything, because why should you? I mean, honestly, if you trust everything, it's almost like you're a little bit ignorant, because most things are not what they seem. Whether it's the news or, a TV program meant to not be what it seems, or whether it's reality, it's kind of all become very fluid and murky as to what is, what truth even is. The word itself has lost a lot of meaning in the last few years. And so I think when we look at this kind of two-faced man who's seeing everything and seeing what's wrong and seeing the corruption and seeing the hypocrisy, and the hypocrisy is a key word, because what happens in our world is that we're always spotting hypocrisy. That's hypocritical. And I remember when I was really young, I became a vegetarian when I was 12. It was this like huge battle in my life with my family, with my mother. She made dinner every night, and it was like this really, like, she basically felt like I was doing something against her. Like I was like struggling against her. I was not really much of a struggler against her. That wasn't part of my personality to do things to like particularly just, anger her. So when I did do something, it was because it was like what I believed and what what was true for me. And so it wasn't coming from a place of just wanting to be like that. But I remember that there was this one kind of chicken that she used to make, and it was like a recipe of my brother's friend or something. It's called garlic chicken. And I loved it, and I had loved it my whole life. And most meat I just didn't like. I mean, I literally just didn't even like it. I didn't want it. It made me feel sick. Like I just didn't have a strong relationship with eating animal products. And this chicken, she made for some dinner, like maybe a year after I'd become, officially announced my vegetarianism. And I wanted it, I wanted to eat it. And so I had some. And immediately it was like, oh, you're a hypocrite. Oh, now you have to eat meat all the time. Now you can't even say no to the meat anymore. It's like this whole thing where I was somehow no longer able to do that at all. And that was not the only case that happened. And that happened to me in several other occasions with other people's parents, with my dad, my stepmom. There were several different occasions where that came up for me, that hypocrisy. You're a vegetarian, you can't do that. And I was like, and I remember even at 12 years old, 12 or 13, I was like, really? I was like, that's kind of stupid. Don't you think we should live in a world where we like encourage people to mostly make healthy choices? And like occasionally, if you choose to do something different, why does that make you a hypocrite? Why are you not just, and it's because of the title, right? Because you have to call yourself something. But for me, the reason I had to call myself something was to announce officially to the family that I wouldn't be eating that meat anymore. So it was this like, damned if you do, damned if you don't. Like, I have to say that I'm this because I don't want to be forced to eat meat every day. But if I occasionally decide to eat some, suddenly I have to eat it all the time, or I have, or I'm a hypocrite, which, for me has never been a big, that I don't feel a lot of concern around somebody else thinking I'm a hypocrite, because I do have all these planets in Purva Bhadrapada, and I see how much hypocrisy there is all around me. So it's not, we're all hypocrites. Everybody's a hypocrite if we want to walk around pointing fingers. Ultimately, the goal is to look at ourselves, right? And if we are awake enough, we can look at ourselves and say, these are the ways in which I'm dissonant from what I really believe, or what I practice, or what I, want to practice, or who I want to be. And that's okay, because there's obviously dissonance between that. Again, you would be enlightened. You wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be making this video. You wouldn't be watching it if it was any other way. So to act as though we're supposed to be that already, and to feel like anything less than that is hypocrisy, is ludicrous. I mean, it's actually ludicrous. And I had another example was brought up to me when I was first becoming a mother. And I was seeing a therapist at the time who had 6 children. And she said to me something like, the ideal mother is not something you're actually ever supposed to be, right? You're not ever going to actually be her. Like, it's great to hold that vision and to work towards that, but no one's actually that person. That is actually an imagined being that isn't any mother. There's no mother who's like that. And so I was like, wow, it was like such a relief to hear that, so just like, yes, like, take the weight off your shoulders. There's no such thing as the perfect person. There's no such thing as the perfect vegetarian. There's no such thing as the perfect this person, because even the perfect vegetarian who never eats any plant food, or who never eats any, animal products, and doesn't do this or whatever, they have their many ways in which they're hypocrites, guaranteed. And I could pull out specific examples, but what's the point? There's particular things that we wrap our head into, and that we have these strong confirmation biases around. This is right, this is wrong, this is like this is like that. But nothing is ever, no one has all the answers. No one's holding them. And that's the point. The point is to share what you have, to share your information, to share your piece of knowledge, to offer it forward, not to be perfect, but to try to collectively get better, and to realize if someone over there is eating all, fake foods and stuffing burgers and fries from fast food restaurants in their mouth every day, that is affecting you, even if you're sitting there with your pure clean vegan diet. Like, there is not a separation. And so walking around sort of, pointing the fingers and just calling out the hypocrisy in everyone else is really shortcoming. Now, of course, calling out hypocrisy in government or big corporations is really important. Calling it out in people who have power over you is very important, because it's necessary. Or in a relationship you're in, when you're in a situation where it's, you're being gaslit or something like that, it's very important to be able to use those tuned powers of perception to see what is and call it out, only so that you can walk out of it or change it somehow, not to get stuck in that, not to spend the rest of your life like, that person's like this and this is like this and the government's like this. It's to change it. It's to be able to change the dynamic. You need to name it and call it out for that. But ultimately, then you need to leave that there and move forward and actually make a different choice, or do something differently. See the future, see where things are going, remember the past, but hold yourself in this present, and know that the present is malleable, and that you have a lot of volition and a lot of power. and also lack a lot of power and need everyone else. You need your neighbors, you need your partner or your friends. You need your parents if they're around, or you need whatever they gave you when they were around. You need your children just as much as they need you. Everybody needs each other. And that community of people is perfect when we get us all together. When we have, so-and-so's strengths, so-and-so's weaknesses, so-and-so's blind spots, so-and-so's power spots, so-and-so has clarity and vision on this, this person doesn't really ever talk, but man, look at all the stuff they do. There's so many different ways in which we show up in the world, and we need all the different faces. We need all the different aspects of that. So instead of focusing so much on even our own hypocrisy, or our own ways in which I prefer to think of it in the ways in which we're dissonant from what we believe, and from what our values are, we're able to see so much in that when we see it in ourselves, so much more than when we just see it in other people. The seeing it in other people is a start, but if we get stuck there, then we never change here. So these retrograde planets are helping us change here and not just out there, because until the change is happening here, any change we do make in the outside world is going to be founded on our fears, confirmation biases, and wrong beliefs. So all the different things people are trying to do to make the world better are often really ill-founded and not going to make things better after all. So that's something to really consider. I will end on Mercury being retrograde and this Jupiter-Mercury mutual drishti that's happening here. And this really brings up our discernment. Mercury is our discernment. It is our capacity to take in information, determine its truth or falsehood, categorize it, put it where it needs to go, and name it, call it something, right? So again, that place where we do sometimes need to call something and say, this is this. And it doesn't mean that it can't change again. It doesn't mean that it's stuck like that. It just means that if you stay in wishy-washy land forever, then you will literally stay in wishy-washy land forever. You need to commit to things. And that's what Jupiter helps Mercury do. Jupiter is where our beliefs tell us this is something, this means something. And Mercury's like, does it mean anything? Maybe it doesn't mean something. Maybe this is like this. It could also be like this over here. There's a lack of commitment to belief in Mercury. And in Jupiter, sometimes there's overcompensation for that. Too much belief, too many theses being drawn, too many hypotheses, too many, too many conclusions. And so together they make that true wisdom come about, where we have the facts, we have the information, and we have that discernment to determine what we're taking in and what we're putting out. And we also have that capacity to draw something from it, to assimilate that information and make it mean something. Because if we don't, then it's just a sea of facts. And since they're both in their own sign, and Mercury is actually exalted in his own sign of Virgo, he's the only planet that's exalted in his own sign, and Jupiter's in his own sign. So there's a lot of intelligence running here, and we have a chance to review things. We have a chance to speak slower. We have a chance to look back at the past and what we've done before, and make better choices for the future. And not just collectively, but personally. And so this is a really powerful time with all these retrograde planets. And of course, I will see if I can make this, and just to show you guys, because I know many of you follow Western astrology as well, you can see that there's actually 6 planets retrograde. The outer planets are all retrograde. In Vedic astrology, we just use the seen planets because this was an ancient science downloaded from the seers back before the telescope. And so their eyes could see Saturn, but their eyes couldn't see Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto. And so they didn't have those configured in. And sometimes I'll reflect on them for big events, these outer planets, because they do really affect our big sweeping events. In people's charts, we don't really use them so much because it's, they're very far away. Their gravitational pull, we call the planets graha, in Sanskrit, and graha means to grab, and it's like literally the gravitational energy of the planet pulling on you at that time. And so the energy is so far away that the grab is really more universal and societal than it is personal. But just to show, we have our Jupiter, our Saturn, our Mercury, and then Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, all retrograde. So this is a time of delays. This is a time of things being slowed down. This is a time of less output, and that's something to really understand. And there's a lot of projects you might have going forward. You know, for many of us, we're kind of in this 9-month school year paradigm, whether you have children or not, you know, in school. A lot of us operate on that. The summer is like a vacation, and now it's fall and it's time to start, you know, it's like Labor Day just finished, time to get going. And you can see that things might be a little like slow to start. So, you know, it's something to just accept and understand. And honestly, Jupiter and Saturn are often retrograde this time of year. So that's not, you know, anything new under the sun. And Mercury goes retrograde 3 times a year. So it's also not necessarily new to have all of them be retrograde. And these outer planets don't affect us quite as much. What we do see is the Mars and Venus are not retrograde. The sun and moon are never retrograde because they're luminaries. But Venus and Mars are not retrograde. They are forward-moving planets. So, you know, bless the relationships people are in. It could be a bit of a challenging time for relationships for sure as a result of that, because the Mars and Venus does bring a lot of feisty energy. Some of it's fun and flirty and sexual, and some of it's intense and heated and angry. And we tend to blame other people first, kind of like we see the hypocrisy in others before we see our own. We tend to blame other people for our laziness, or other people for our lack of showing up, or our lack of output and things like that. So that's something to just have a heightened awareness around. And, you know, Venus, like I said, in Leo can be a little bit of the, you know, the diva type energy. So we can feel easy to dismiss others, and like we're the ones who need to be bowed down to. So good to keep that in mind. And hopefully this humbling moon in Aquarius is that counterpoint we need in this month to really see the effect of the choices we make and of the power we wield, and to really allow ourselves to, you know, be humble enough to see our own shortcomings, see our own dissonance, and find a way to work with the collective around us, probably to begin with, and create more of that community that's like someone you know, not this society that's out there that can be blamed and occasionally voted on, but not, you don't affect it. And so, yes, hopefully that is helpful for you. And I will have Mars for all 12 signs sending out this weekend. So if you're not yet on my email list, please sign up for it. www.radhahomeyoga.com. Namaste.